Anything that comes out of his mouth, you can believe it. It's a man of character, except anything he says about my golf game is untrue. Don't believe a word of it. But and I know about yours. So thank you, Dave. I appreciate an opportunity just to share with you for a few moments this morning. Let's pray together. Lord, we ask that for just a few minutes this morning, you'd anoint the reading and the preaching of your word. Anoint it with the precious gift of your Holy Spirit. And we ask it in the name of the precious gift of your Son, Jesus. Amen. I'm reading from 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 13 this morning. You'll have to bear with me. I've been having voice trouble for about a month now. So if it goes on me, I'll scratch it out. So 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. So prepare your minds for service and have self-control. All your hope should be for the gift of grace that will be yours when Jesus Christ comes again. What a year it's been, right? It was about a year ago, this meeting, around this time, when the whole COVID thing blew up. I never thought that the comment, I wouldn't touch them with a 6-foot pole, would become national policy, but here we are this morning. But I've asked myself some questions through this past year, and I want to ask you a few this morning. Has it driven us closer to Jesus? Has it driven us closer to him? And I've been asking another question. Has it driven us back to that glorious doctrine that seems to have fallen by the wayside in both our denomination and our day? I've been praying that the Lord will drive us back to that. He's put that on my heart. To rediscover that doctrine. Which one? The imminent return of Jesus Christ. If I ask you this morning, who's the greatest basketball player of all time? The GOAT. When I was in college in my 20s, the debate went, Jordan Bird, Jordan Bird, Jordan Bird. And by the way, they tipped the hat to each other. Did you know that? Magic says Larry was the best ever. Larry says, I go by championships. Magic has more. He's the best. Larry, Magic. And then a young man by the name of Michael Jordan walked onto the scene. And both Bird and Magic say he's the greatest of all time. And one reporter was trying to skirt the issue. And this is what he said. Bird and Magic are the two best basketball players on the ground, and Jordan is the best one in the air. And I say to that reporter, nice try, nice try. But we all know that Jordan retired early, and he played baseball for 2 years. And at the 2-year mark, he called a press conference. And with 2 words, he re-entered the NBA. I'm back. He said, I'm back. It was a great day for basketball fans. We got to see him win 3 more championships, end his career for 2 seasons with the Washington Wizards. But I want to tell you something. The coming of Michael Jordan has come and gone, and the world hasn't changed that much, if at all, because of it. But there's another second coming. Jesus is coming back to this earth one day, and it won't be with 2 little words. It will be with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, with the trumpet call of God. And I'm telling you, on that day, at that second coming, the world and the universe will be changed forever. Amen? It's going to be changed. The great hope and expectation of the Christian faith is focused on one dramatic, startling event, sudden as a bolt of lightning, and sharp as the tip of a sword, the bodily return of Jesus Christ and the renewal of all things. The Old Testament is saturated with prophecies concerning Christ's first advent. Both the Old and New Testament are saturated with verses about his second coming. According to Herbert Lockyer, he gives these following statistics in his book, Fairest of All. One scholar has counted 1,845 references to Christ's second coming in the Old Testament, with 17 books give it prominence. In the 260 chapters of the New Testament, there are, count them, 318 references to the second advent of Jesus Christ, an amazing 1 out of every 30 verses. 23 of the 27 New Testament books refer to this great event. And for every prophecy in the Bible concerning Christ's first advent, there are, count them, 8 that look forward to his second coming. Amazing. Jesus said, I will come back. Jesus made a promise he intends to keep. We have his word on it, and we can trust that Jesus will keep his word. He is coming back. So we all know that. But what we don't know is when he will come for us. In C.S. Lewis' Voyage of the Dawn Treader, a conversation between Lucy and Aslan, who is the Christ figure, as you know in that story. And Aslan says, "Do not look so sad, Lucy. We shall meet soon again." Lucy says, "Please, Aslan, what do you call soon?" And Aslan says, "I call all time soon." And instantly he vanishes away. Listen, we do know that he is coming again, but we don't know when he's coming. But I'll tell you what, we know this. It's closer today than it was yesterday, and it'll be closer tomorrow than it is today as we stand here. A gentleman was visiting a school, and he told the students, "I'm coming back, and the cleanest desk gets a prize." So one little girl said, "I'm going to win the prize," and all her classmates laughed at her because she had the messiest desk, most disorderly desk. And they said, "How are you going to win the prize?" And they wanted to know when he was coming back, and he said, "I can't tell you that." So she said, "Well, I'm going to clean it first thing Monday morning." "Well, what if he comes on Friday?" "Well, then I'm going to clean it every morning." "What if he comes in the afternoon?" "Well, then I'm going to clean it every afternoon too." And then they said, "You don't know when he's coming." Here's what she said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just keep it clean. I'll just keep it clean." And she wanted to be ready. Are we ready for his soon return? Are you living so close to Jesus that you are ready for his return at any moment? A young man was to return home and marry his bride-to-be. He'd been away. He worked hard. He saved all kinds of money to buy her a house. Didn't tell her she was coming home, that he was coming home. He got home about midnight and said, "I got to go see her." When he came upon the house, he saw it was lit up with lights. When he got closer, he heard music. When he got closer, he saw dancing going on inside. And when he looked in the window, he saw his bride-to-be in the embrace of another man. Dropped his head, walked away, never to return again. Are we living so close to Jesus that when he comes, we will be ready at any moment? And when he comes, where will he find his bride? I hope it's not in the embrace of somebody else. We are to do the Lord's work while we wait too, right? Scripture's clear. We are to be doing the work of God. Amazing words from D.L. Moody. F.B. Meyer, that great preacher, said to Moody one day, "What is the secret to your success?" And these words, I marvel at him. Moody said, "For many years, I've never given an address or a sermon without the consciousness that the Lord may come before I finish my sermon. He might come before I'm done." There was a church, and next to it was a little home for little retarded boys and girls. I think today, politically correct would be mentally handicapped little boys and little girls. And that church reached out to that group of boys and girls, and they started bringing them to church. They started ministering in the home. One day, the preacher was out talking to the janitor. "How's it going?" And the janitor said, "Everything's great but one thing." And the preacher said, "What's that?" He said, "I can't seem to keep the windows of this home clean." And he said, "Why is that?" "Because ever since you guys have been bringing them over to your church and coming in, they've learned about Jesus. Some of them have come to know Jesus. And then they learned about the second coming. And I can't keep the windows clean because those little kids are always pressing their face and their hands up against the window, looking to the clouds to see if Jesus is coming." And I want to ask you, after the season we've been through, are the window panes of your heart dirty this morning? Are they dirty and filthy? I pray they're dirty and filthy from all the looking up we're doing, waiting for the soon return of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Matthew 24 says, 24, "So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him." We are to keep watch because we don't know the day of our Lord's return. Let us never forget, too, that day is a day of what? Separation. That great day is a day of separation. Do you remember the parable of the great catch of fish? Do you remember the parable of the wheat and the tares? Do you remember Jesus' words about the sheep and the goats? On that day, which will be both a glorious day and a sobering day, Jesus will separate the good fish from the bad fish, the wheat from the tares, the sheep from the goats. He will separate the righteous, those who've been justified by faith in Christ alone, from the wicked, those who do not put their trust in Christ alone. Revelation 2:14 and 15. Sobering, then death and grave themselves were hurled into the lake of fire, which is the second death. If anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. I tell people often, a lot of people think life's hard to figure out, complex. I don't believe it for a moment. I think it's really easy, but you have to know the key. And the key to life is to know the one who can get you out of the grave. And I ask often, and we need to ask everyone we know this question: who are you trusting to get you out of your grave one day? So we can respond with, I am trusting the one who got himself out of his grave on the third day to get me out of mine one day, to get me out of my grave one day. I'm trusting Jesus to get me out of the grave and keep me out of the lake of fire. A lake of fire. By the way, when I read the lake of fire, I see nothing but the mercy of God in that. That's my take whenever I read it. God is a merciful God. I was at Sun Life training up in Elburn, Illinois. A young man was training, and he commented on Revelation 21:4. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the older things have passed away. He said, now this is just my opinion. Listen, when we pick up a Bible commentary, that's just another man's opinion. Sometimes we treat it like it's the inspired word of God. It's not. It's one man's opinion on the scriptures. And so that's what this young man was saying. It's my opinion. Then he asked this question: why are tears the only issue mentioned twice in that verse? And then he spoke these words. Whether you agree with them or not, it's worthy of our thought. I believe that it is because we will witness the lost tossed into the lake of fire. And then immediately after that, Jesus will wipe the very last tears from our eyes, and we'll never shed another one again. That was his take on it. Robin and I pastored a church in Webster, Massachusetts, little storefront. We were standing out on the sidewalk one day, and there's a lady there, godly lady. You know those people, you can't wait to talk to them because some spiritual truth is going to come to you from them? She was one of these. Funny, but boy, when it came to the things of God. And her name was Sherry, her husband was Brian, and they had 3 boys. And Derek was 21 years old. And we were standing out there, and I'll never forget, I'll take this moment to my grave. She said, Derek had never accepted Jesus as a savior, and he was wrestling with it, deciding whether he was going to do it or not. And she watched this turmoil going on, and one day in the house, she said, Derek, you know how much I love you, right? She said, but if you go the direction I think you're going, because he was leaning away, I just want you to know one thing, son. You know I love you with all my heart, right? But if you go the direction and make the decision I think you might, I just want you to know on that day, when he hurls you into the lake of fire, I will raise both hands to God and say, I praise you, you holy, righteous God of Israel who judges righteously. Some people think, oh, she didn't love her son. She loved her kids as much as we do, maybe more. But she was saying, God's word comes first, and I can't change it for anybody. And God comes first in my life. I was reflecting one day on this whole lake of fire. It's cutting through my old sanctuary at my last church, and a friend of mine was there. And I said to him, oh, what a day that's going to be when he throws disease and death and grave into that lake of fire. When he throws cancer, my church is blowing up with cancer right now. When he throws cancer into the lake of fire. When he throws heart disease into the lake of fire. When he throws COVID-19 into that lake of fire. What a day that will be. I said, I might do a cartwheel. I hope I don't fall in. Here's what he said to me. He stopped me in my tracks. I was like, whoa, I was in awe. I said, I might do a cartwheel. He said, Bob, that would be pretty hard to do from your knees. We're all going to be on our knees on that day, I guarantee it. That's the glorious point that he made. That will be an awesome day. It will be both sobering beyond belief, humans cast into that lake, and glorious beyond belief, death and COVID and cancer, the grave, all thrown in. I think the hymn writer got it right. In verse 1, he said, there's a great day coming. Verse 2, he said, there's a bright day coming. Verse 3, he said, there's a sad day coming. Are you ready? Are you ready for the judgment day? I'll tell you this, that great getting up morning, that great second coming day will be all 3 rolled into one. A great day, a bright day, a sad day. all rolled into one. I want to close by reading you a passage of scripture. Titus chapter 2. Listen to these words. I pray God would restore that doctrine to our day again in the days we're living in. Titus 2:11, for the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age, while we wait for the blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all wickedness and to purify for himself a people that are his very own, eager to do what is good. These then are the things you should teach, encourage, and rebuke with all authority. Do not let anyone despise you. I pray he'll restore it in our day. Let's pray. Oh Lord, just as you restored this neglected doctrine to our Millerite and Advent Christian forefathers in your love and in your grace and in your mercy, would you once again restore this precious and once again lost and neglected doctrine to us in these days in which we now live? Do it, O Lord, for the sake, the honor, and the glory of your Son, Jesus Christ. And God's people said, amen. God bless you. Thank you, David.
That was encouraging. And I want to tell you folks, that Titus 2 passage will preach as well, although he'd already preached by the time he got to it. But we were doing that in prayer meeting the other night, looking for the blessed hope. Because I grew up in a church that was called the Blessed Hope Advent Christian Church in Waterville, Maine. And we referred to that passage a lot. But the reason it'll preach good, most of you preachers who are here don't have many from your flock around you, so you can use this. It says, the grace has appeared. That's the past, in the past. That's verse 11. Verse 12, it says, and he teaches us how to live a godly and righteous life in this present day. That's the present day. And then the verse we all know, the 13th is, and we are awaiting or looking for the blessed hope of his appearing. So past, present, future in 3 verses. You take it from there, but it's good stuff, and it'll preach. Thank you, Bob. We appreciate that. We are going to ask for a report of the Credentials Committee. We're roughly following page 2 in your book, and you should have gotten 3 things when you registered today. One of them is the booklet that we really have all our information in, and one of them is a sheet like this that was the call to the meeting that went out to the churches the last 2 months. The mailing went out twice. Because it has a couple of motions on it. You probably only have one side, just the page with the motions. But there are 2 motions that our executive board is bringing to the delegates today. So you'll need that. And then the information about the cabins at camp that we're going to be talking about today. And that'll be referred to in our superintendent's report and Bill's report. So you need those 3 things. We're going to try to get by without tellers as much as possible, so we're not distributing and passing stuff around too much today. So we'll see how it goes with that. But if you've got those 3 things, you're good to go. And so I'm going to ask Janet Dubois if she would. First of all, I'll mention the committee. Janet Dubois and Angela Johnson were the ones at the table who greeted you, our registration credentials committee. And I'm going to ask Janet to give a report, maybe at this blue microphone, because this is untouched.
We have 5 conference officers present, 1 WHNFM president, 14 pastors, 11 delegates, for a total of 31.
Okay. I'm going to declare them seated so that they can vote after this. So we'll declare the 31 delegates that have registered that are seated. Thank you for being here today. And probably be a good idea to have a motion to extend privileges of the floor to anyone else who is not a delegate today. Someone want to do that? Okay, Norm Sherwood, is there a second? Moved and seconded, David Richards. All in favor, say aye. And opposed, no, and it's carried. Okay, the report of the president is 1 page over in the book. And it'll probably go quicker if I try to stick pretty much to it. But we all know every report that you see these days says, well, the pandemic has affected this year. So we know that's true. It was a unique year, a lot of limitations on our ministry. Within the first 10 weeks of the year, we did have our annual Pastors and Wives Supper, which we usually have the second week in January. It was attended by 39 plus 4 children in our child care section of the building. And I want to tell you this, child care is a popular thing for that supper because the couple that used it, the Rabies from Nazareth, he said, we almost didn't come back for the evening. We left the kids off and says, we're free. And so, but anyway, we had a good group of young people taking care of the kids, and it was a very successful event. And I'm glad it was in January, because this year in January, it could not happen. So First Church in Hickory hosted that. Northern District churches were able to gather at Tabernacle for their fifth Sunday sing at the end of January. It had been, or actually the first week, it was when it would have been in December. But we did have one event with the Northern District of the conference for our sing. And we conducted the annual delegate session, and that was, as you know, just before all the restrictions hit, the first Saturday of March. Second paragraph, some ministry has continued despite the restrictions. Monthly mailing of the prayer update. I hope your church gets it and perhaps uses it, distributes it. It comes in a bulletin insert form. We feature 2 conference churches every month for focused prayer, and we've been doing that through the year. The weekly Wednesday luncheon gathering in the Northern Districts has continued to happen. I don't know if we've even missed a week. All the restaurants were closed, and so we met at Calvary Church and stopped at a drive-thru somewhere and picked up a sandwich or brought it. But Calvary hosted for a couple of months, and then once the restaurants reopened. So we have had, we've continued that pretty much throughout the pandemic, and God has been good and allowed for that. The Conference Youth Board has complained via email for future ministry. The Executive Board has been able to meet in person a couple times later in the year, and we did accomplish quite a bit, including a drafting of these 2 items of business that are kind of come to us today. It's a proposal to assist the Appalachian region with $150,000 toward constructing 3 new youth cabins on the campground. This proposal we'll vote on today, handled by the delegates, and some of the officers have had at least 4 special meetings at local banks. I think it's 5 now. We had one a week or so ago, but we've had meetings with our officers to get all the books changed from the various banks and get everything current and up to date. As recently as yesterday, we had a verification that all the proper signatories are in place. It only takes a year to make that transition. But so there have been a lot of meetings and behind the scenes stuff going on. It's been a busier year than usual in regard to reorganizing the finances and doing some financial planning. The outreach at Blue Ridge Chapel went on this summer. It was able to continue largely under the leadership of Jerry Burnett. He gets a lot of help from Robin and Pam these days because they live right nearby up there on the campground. And the weekly services begin about Memorial Day, which is later than usual. We usually start about mid-April up there, but they continue right on into November. They even had an event at Christmas time as well, the Sunday services right through the month of November. And they received their first official members to the church. Robert and Peggy Sutherland were welcomed in August. So it was a good year, despite all the restrictions. It's hard to do outreach in a pandemic. We all know that. But it was still a good year up there at the chapel. Finally, while 2020 was limited for ministry, it was a banner year for giving. 19 of our 26 conference churches gave to the denomination's United Ministries, total of over almost $241,000. Toward the region's total of $355,000, so $241 from this conference. The regional total was a record for recent years. 8 Piedmont churches gave over $10,000, and 4 others gave over $100 a week to the United Ministries. One of our conference churches led the entire denomination in Penny Crusade for 2020. So despite a very tough year, God has been faithful, and his people have really come through. It's been one of the miracles of this year, because a lot of weeks there were no services in virtually every one of the churches. And then some of the churches very limited through the year. I know our congregation at Fellowship, we missed 9 weeks going just virtual before we had any on-site things happen again around Memorial Day, about the time they were starting at Blue Ridge. So considering the lack, and I don't know about you, but we haven't passed an offering plate since early March last year. So the giving is really incredible. And it's a phenomenon that God has used. In the middle of the summer, we were really concerned because the projections, for instance, on Penny Crusade, were down a lot. But the people really responded, and God allowed it, and He blessed it. And our church had one of its best financial years ever, which means to say people don't like offering plates, I guess. Pull the plates out of there and they'll give like crazy. So whatever it is, God has been good. And we've seen it conference-wide, region-wide, denomination-wide in ways, even halfway through the year, we weren't expecting it. We were expecting to have to make severe cuts, and it just didn't happen. So God is good. That's our testimony for this year. It was a strange year, but God is still God. He's still the Lord of His church. Okay, I'm going to ask one of the VPs. In fact, I'm going to ask Daniel if he'll come up here and do this, handle this report, just ask for, and then also give the greeting, which I probably had him do before the report. So Northern District VP, Daniel, if you would handle receiving this report, then hang around up here so you can give the greeting.
Do I have a motion to accept the report of the president of the Piedmont Conference? Second. A second was Jim Lee. All in favor? I'm impressed I handled that much. Okay, good morning again. Welcome, both on behalf of Lenore Community Church and the Northern District of the Piedmont Advent Christian Conference. We're glad to welcome our brothers and sisters in Christ from the Southern District. We hope you find your time here enjoyable. And if you need a question from me, you'll probably find me back there trying to eat 6 donuts before the break. So I ran specifically where I could have room calorie count to eat my donuts. So at any rate, thank you guys for coming.
Okay, do you have any response to that, Jason? The Southern District VP is here. So we're supposed to enter the record that he said we're glad to be here or something.
On behalf of the Southern District, the churches, the ministers, and the members there, we are thankful and grateful to be here and for the welcome, and especially the donuts, I guess, right? So, thank you.
Okay, and we're glad you're here too. Yeah, the donuts have been referred to twice, so they're going to show up a lot in the minutes, I guess. There's 6 donuts back there. We're going to take a break at the appropriate time in another hour or so in the meeting, because we're really trying to keep it moving so that sometime between noon and 1 we'll be done and on the road and out of here. But we will take a break. So if you didn't eat one yet, or even if you did, eat another one, because we don't want too many of them left over, because Daniel will eat them all if they get left over. They get left here. And you need to know it was good stewardship. We confused them big time at Krispy Kreme this morning. Ordered 6 donuts and then had a coupon for 1 dozen of them being free. And that messed them up. So they only delivered 4 and they only billed us for 3. And I said, I'm not leaving till I get my 5th dozen. They wouldn't let me pay for it. They said, just get out of line. Just go. So anyway, we paid for 3 donuts and there's 5 back there. So as good stewards, we got to make sure they get eaten today while they're still fresh. So anyway, take care of the donuts for us. We'll appreciate it. I need to also say concerning both of our vice presidents, we're very appreciative that they're willing to serve. And like I say, the board has been meeting some this year, and Daniel's been at every one of those meetings at the banks, because you probably know he used to be treasurer, and he's only too happy to show up and sign his name off. So we have been active with our officers this year. We'll say that. Okay, let's move on. On the agenda, it talks about the report of the secretary being next. That has minutes from last year and from the executive board meetings that have been happening this year. So, John, what do you want to say about that? This might be safer.
The only thing I'd want to say about that is that if everybody has a copy, they should be able to read it, and we shouldn't need to go through and read it all again. I don't have any additional copies beyond what's written.
Good. Okay, unless we get an insistence to have them read aloud like happened in the United States Senate this week when they're only spending $1.9 trillion and somebody thought they should read the bill. Who knew? And those who read it found out not much of this has to do with COVID relief, but anyway, let's not get into politics. But I'm assuming most of you probably don't want it audibly read through, so we'd be open to a motion to receive the minutes, unless you see something that you have a question or think needs correction, we'll entertain a motion to receive them. Okay, is there a second? Okay, give your name when you give your motion. How about that? Okay, say give your name and it'll solve a great mystery for John up here. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of receiving the secretary's minutes, please say aye. Opposed, no, and it is carried. We have a report from our regional superintendent, and we didn't include both his titles because he's also the youth director, student ministries director for the region, but we'll let him speak about any of those things. I'm glad to have Bill here today.
Thank you. Good morning. You have the written report in your book, and like John, I'm not going to read that to you. You can read that for yourself. But there are some things I want to highlight in that report, and a few things that are not in that report that I want to talk about this morning, and try to get through this as quickly as possible. But I want to be thorough in what we're talking about. If you look at the second page of the report, a few things there I'd like to highlight. The first, the Regional Youth Board. Per instruction of the regional board itself, we made a decision to expand the youth board for the region beginning in late 2020. We added 2 new members to it. We hope to add 2 more from the other 2 conferences, but Cassie Craig from the Piedmont Conference has been added to the Regional Youth Board, and Amy Williams from the Virginia Conference has been added to the board. And I hope to be able to add another member from Pocahontas and from West Virginia Conference as soon as we can con someone into doing that, I guess might be the best way to say it. But as soon as we can get someone who is willing to do that, we'll add 2 more members to the Regional Youth Board to give us a better representation around the region and a better idea of what's going on within each conference. So we're glad to see that. As Pastor Dave mentioned, United Ministries and Penny Crusade giving was outstanding for 2020. Just unbelievable the amount that the churches in the Appalachian region and specifically in the Piedmont Conference gave to United Ministries, Penny Crusade, and Christmas in October. And if you look at Steve Lawson's report, which you picked up at the table there, if you add up the surplus in all 3 of those areas of giving for 2020, it's close to $100,000 more that we gave in 2020 than we did in 2019 as a denomination. And the Appalachian region was a huge part in that. And the Piedmont Conference was a huge part of the Appalachian region. So we're very grateful to you for doing that. And if you haven't figured it out yet, you cannot outgive God. And those of you that may have given sacrificially throughout the year or gave more than you normally would, I'll leave you with a question to ponder. Did you miss it in 2020 because you gave it to the Lord and to his ministry? And I can answer that for you. No, you did not. God is good and he's gracious, and he gives back to us beyond anything we can ever imagine or even think about. The other thing that I want to report on specifically, of course, is what's going on with our camps in the region. Been in contact with camp directors from all 4 of the conference camps. They're all on the regional board, and we met just a couple of weeks ago. And all 4 conference camps are in the process of being now. And Camp Appalachian, the regional camp. So everything is on go for 2021 as far as the camping season. It's going to look a little different. For those that are dropping off students and for the students themselves and the staff, things are going to look a little bit different, but there's necessary steps that we will probably have to take. But rest assured that we will be taking the steps that are necessary to keep both campers and staff as safe as we possibly can during the weeks of camp. Right now, we're writing new policy on COVID and all the issues that are associated with that. And there's been about 8 pages written so far, and we continue to increase those and modify those and correct those as necessary. And your churches will be getting a copy of those hopefully within the next month or so to distribute to parents for Piedmont Camp and for Camp Appalachian, so that they have an idea of what we're doing to keep their children safe whenever they come to camp. So that's a very important part of what the Regional Youth Board has been doing this year. Also, we're moving forward with summer ministry. Right now, we have 4 young people committed to summer ministry team, and we have 2 more that are giving it very serious prayer and thought, and I hope to hear from those very soon. But as of now, we have Andrew Sherwood from Calvary. We have Graham Helton from Boone. We have Lily Lamb from Dowling Park, and we have Savannah Minyard, who is a student at Liberty, and also a young lady that I know from Taylorsville, was in some of our plays at Fellowship Church. Those are the 4 that are committed, and we're waiting to hear from Cadell Perry. I met with Cadell last week and talked with him a little bit, and he's very excited about it and is praying and thinking about it. And I will be meeting with another young lady from Taylorsville that I've known for many, many years, Caroline Dula, and talking with her about summer ministry. You may be wondering, why aren't you talking to our students? Well, I have. And a lot of our students that normally would, there's been different issues have come up and they've not been able to. So there are years like that when we have to reach outside of our circle, which is fine, and draw in some students from other places to work with our summer ministry summer ministry teams. I'm very excited about these 6, so be praying for them as they prepare to do summer ministry. We're looking for a couple of places to send them. We have the 4 conference camps, which will take them, but that still leaves us with a couple of weeks that are open. We don't have anywhere to send those students. So be praying about that. If your church or a couple of churches in your area would like to go together and hire a team, let me know. The cost is $250 per student per week. So if you hire a team of 2, obviously $500 for the week for them to come and do ministry in your church or in your community. So be thinking about that and praying about that as well. The dates for Piedmont Camp are June 27th through July 2nd, and the dates for Camp Appalachian are July 18 through 24. So keep those dates in mind as well. A couple other things, and I'll get into the campground presentation very quickly. One thing that I'm really excited about that we had hoped to kick this off in January, it just didn't work out time-wise, but in the fall of the year, we are really hoping to launch the Ministry Training Institute in the Piedmont Conference in the Appalachian region. And Ministry Training Institute, if you're not familiar with that, it is a program that allows people to be trained not just for ministry, not just for pastoral ministry, but for youth ministry, music ministry, deacons, elders, deaconesses, Sunday school superintendents, basically anyone in your church who would like some expanded theological and spiritual training. MTI is available. It's a 3-year program. It's 1 course per semester, so it's not overly burdensome and it's not overly expensive. And I'll be glad to talk with you more about that if you are interested in that, or folks in your church are interested in receiving some additional training for their leadership position. So keep MTI in mind. And also, I think Rob will probably mention it in Steve's report, Steve Lawson's report when he gives it, but Triennial Convention is coming up. It was supposed to have been in August, but because of the COVID situation, that didn't happen. But April 21, 22, and 23, ACGC will host the Triennial Convention, and it will be done virtually. So you can attend to that. If you look in Steve's report, it will give you the dates and the times and the registration when that's all available. So keep those dates in mind, April 21 through 23 for this year's Triennial Conference. Okay, get to the campground report, you'll be hearing about this from different folks throughout the meeting today. But if you've been around me long at camp and you've listened to me talk about the regional campground in Blowing Rock, you've heard me say that we need to do some major changes for our youth program up there. And the biggest part of those changes, not only ministry related, but the way that we have to sleep students whenever we use the Blowing Rock, the female the mission building and the building is overflow needed. Because I was having to sleep 2 students to a bed and 3 to 4 students to a room without a counselor present in that room. We simply can't hire 20 extra staff members to put in one of the rooms. And it creates a bit of a problem for us and creates a big headache for those of us who are involved in leadership of the camping program about what might happen or about what might be perceived as happening in a situation like that. And it's been a burden on my heart for many, many years. And I spoke with the regional board at mid-February meeting last year, presented a dream to them, and that dream is slowly working its way into reality. And that dream is to expand the youth program at the Blowing Rock Campground. And the expansion of that would include building new dorm-style buildings for our students to be housed in. And we would start with 3 of those. And these are, you have, hopefully you picked up one of these and about 24-foot log cabin. And there's a layout in your information that you picked up. We can sleep 14, would be 12 campers and 2 staff in one of these buildings with complete toilet facilities, 2 showers, 2 toilets, 2 vanities in the building. And we've gotten a great price on it. That's on the back page of what you received. Unfortunately, from the time we originally got the price last March until this March, there's been a considerable increase in that. We originally started out, we felt like we could do this for $150,000 complete, all 3 buildings. That is not possible today. If you've done any building lately, building materials have just gone outrageous in their cost. So the cost of these cabins have gone up, and now we're looking at probably around $180,000 to build the 3, and that includes the 10% cost overrun, which is always going to be something that you don't count on. But you have the financial statement in the information that you have on the back sheet there. Each building would run between $49,000 and $50,000 to be built if we construct them ourselves, and right now that is the plan. And it's like, it'll take you back to your childhood if you build one of these. If you played with Lincoln Logs as a child, these are just Lincoln Logs on steroids. And it's a lot of fun to build. It really is, at least for me. It may not be for you, but for me, it was a lot of fun building our house, which we live in a log home. So you see the cost there. These are up-to-date costs from all of the suppliers. And of course, this is material only. And we will be working as hard as we can to keep those costs down, to try to have some materials donated if possible, as well as having the labor donated. And if we were to choose to have these erected for us, you also see the cost there. Labor to build each one of these from the sill plate up to the felt paper would be $29,000, right at $30,000 a piece to have the log home company come in and erect these for us. So you have those costs there. You have the information there in front of you. You have the building, what it looks like, and a possible layout of it. This is a board of the layout of the campground, and you're welcome to come up during break and take a look at this. I'll be up here and try to answer any questions you may have about it. And you'll be hearing more about this in the business section of our meeting today. But be giving this thought, be giving this prayer. If you would like to participate in the construction of these buildings, we will be having times of work once everything is settled and all the financing is in place and everything is delivered. Then we will set dates to have people come up and do the work. I've been in contact and am in contact with Watauga County Planning Department and their septic department about all these plans. They're aware of what we're doing. They don't have the exact details yet, but we're working with them to make sure we have everything lined up and can do this exactly as we would like to. So if you have any questions about that, about any of that, please ask me during the break or anytime today. I'll be around. I'll be more than happy to answer those. My computer is set up in the back and it has a slideshow presentation. It has all this information in it. Stop by and take a look at that during the break as well. And I think that is everything I wanted to mention at this point. And again, like I said, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have about the campground report or about my reports in the booklet. Thank you. Yes.
I'm sorry for not prepared for Facebook questions, but someone, Glenn Hill, asked, what about family camp? I don't know what this reference is. I know they asked me, so that was.
About what?
Family camp.
About family camp. Okay. Travis, any information you can give us about family camp? Are you directing this year?
Me and Chris are still on direction, but I don't know.
Okay.
That's all that's all I can give you right now.
All right.
We typically.
It will start the day after Camp Appalachian. Camp Appalachian ends on Saturday, the 24th. So family camp would start on the 25th and run that final week of July, would be the dates of it. So hopefully that will at least get them started. And I know we'll be hearing more from the directors of family camp as things come forward.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Okay, any further questions to his report right now? He'll be available to the day if you want to do some one-on-one as well, or a motion to receive it. Okay, Regional Superintendent's report, seconded. Norm made it. Yep. Yep. So it's been moved and seconded that we receive the report of the, and we know all of these are with appreciation. There's people working behind the scenes all the time on our behalf, and we're grateful. There's no further discussion. All in favor say aye, and opposed no. Okay, Robin Buchanan, you're in the bullpen. Just a second. You're up next to report. I'll give a couple of logistics updates. My goal is sometime around 11 to take our break, a 15-minute break, and to have most of the reporting done by then. And I think that's an achievable goal. We can do that. And then to do the new business after the break. And there's a couple things, pieces of information toward that I'll be giving you just before we take the break. So but I want to tell you, because just like NASCAR, some of you have to schedule your pit stops. And so just so you'll know, the goal is sometime around 11, we'll take a little bit of a break. And the other thing that I want you to maybe use the break to the advantage to get accomplished is I did not announce the appointment of our other committee, and I need to get that in the record. And that is David Blythe is going to be serving as the chairperson, and Robin Copeland will be helping him put together the business and resolutions. And specifically with resolutions, as you know, we like to acknowledge the passing of any of the ministers and wives, especially in our conference in the last year. So if you have any information you want to make sure doesn't get omitted today, David and Robin would really like to get your information. If you know of any that have passed in the last year since our last convention, you can think of that, help them remember that. That would help us for our resolutions, and let them know perhaps during the break time so that they can bring that to us later in the meeting as well. So those 2 points of business. Now, he doesn't look like Steve Lawson, but he's speaking for him today. Steve is a brave man. Robert Buchanan has the ACGC report for Steve Lawson.
To bring you greetings in on behalf of Steve Lawson and the Advent Christian General Conference, and also the Conference Executive Committee. You have the report in front of you. I'm not going to read it today, but I want to just highlight a couple of things. As Bill has already mentioned, some of the things you'll notice there on the very beginning is the financial giving that we've had. Dave has mentioned it concerning the Piedmont Conference churches, and for the whole denomination, I believe it speaks well of us that even though for the majority of the coronavirus season that we have not been able to meet as churches, the churches have continued to give, and that's just tremendous. If Dawn Rutan were able to be here today, she would applaud you as well as the financial director of ACGC. But you'll notice there, Penny Crusade, United Ministries, Penny Crusade, and Christmas in October, that we exceeded all of those. We ended the year, if we could use the vernacular, in the black this past year in 2020. United Ministries, we exceeded it by over $55,000, $55,600. Penny Crusade was almost $24,000 over the budgeted goal, and Christmas in October, which has generally been WH and FMS promoted, but the whole denomination has participated and has been over $10,600 more. So that's just a tremendous testimony upon the giving of the people, even during this coronavirus pandemic that we've had. International missions, just to say, Jeff Walsh is recovering from COVID-19. A number of you have already had it, or you've been inoculated against it, hopefully. But just be praying for Jeff and Rhonda and their whole family during this time, if you would. Some of the highlights: Russell and Pon Yoon are going to be going to Thailand to work with the mission there. We are praying for them. Russell is retiring from his position and his employment in California. They're going to be moving there. He's already bought property right next to the property for the mission there. And Pon grew up there in the area and in the church, her and her sister both. So it's going to be helping to take over the leadership that was started by John and Mal Middlewood. One of the things that we have been trying to do with the international missions and with IMAC is to identify church unreached people groups. Really, if you get into the Greek word ethne, that really is talking about unreached people groups. It's not just going into areas that are already churched or already saturated with a lot of missionaries and stuff. We're trying to identify unreached people groups. And Tanzania has identified the Hadzabe tribe. So our groups of international missionaries here, Advent Christian missionaries, are reaching out to the Hadzabe tribe in Tanzania. If you have been following in any way the situation with Erwin and Rowena Cabrizos, who were in the Philippines during the coronavirus pandemic, their son was kind of stuck in Japan. So for the past 9 months, he's been stuck in Japan, but they have been reunited now, so that was a good thing. But ministry is still going on there as well. Prayer needs, you'll notice those. Continue to pray for Myanmar. They're undergoing a military coup right now, and even though they say that our missions are not, our churches there are not affected, it's just a matter of stepping over a thin line probably in many of these governments. So we want to be praying for them and as well. India, we want to be praying for India and for Emmanuel and those men there, those pastors, because they continue to struggle with the government financial situation, especially the property that we own there. It appears, from what we understand, that it is because we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places, that most of the persecution there against us and others is because of Christians, because of Christianity, because of believers in Jesus Christ. Not so much against the Muslims and the Hindus. They're at war with each other anyway, but there's a concerted effort on the government's part for persecution against the Christians there. So we'll be praying for Emmanuel and the mission there in India as well. As Bill has already mentioned, Ministry Training Institute, as you can see there, we have 5 field offices and 32 students that are currently participating in that. I want to be praying for Matt Larkin and for the field office leaders and the others that are involved in that as well, that we can be actively involved in training young people and old people. That doesn't exclude you if God's calling your heart to ministry to be trained in the under the MTI. The church health and communications there, you'll notice that some of the things that are going on, some of the resources that you have available to you. If you are not currently receiving some of these things by email, you can go on the ACGC website and sign up. That's all they're looking for is an email address from you, and you can receive the weekly updates and the other things that come out by email as well. Beth Larkin continues to work with our WH and FMS, and the women's ministry groups, as you can read about that as well. And I'll leave that up to Karen in just a minute if she gives a report concerning that as well. Triennial Convention has already been mentioned, April the 21st to the 23rd. You can go online on the ACGC website /triennial and sign up for that as well. And we hope that you do participate. It is going to be virtual. Everything is going to be virtual this year, but that you're able to participate and to vote on that if you are a delegate. That's all I have to say about that. Yes.
I apologize for the reports that you have from Steve. There's one page missing. This is what happens when you don't have your secretary do stuff. And you do it yourself. But you have the front page and the back page twice. The middle page is missing. So if you were looking, trying to keep up with Rob, that's my fault. I apologize for that.
Every once in a while, we do something like that just to see if you're paying attention. And I assume everybody was. Okay, Steve's not here to defend himself at all, so we don't have a whole lot of extra. But let me just say this at this point in the meeting. The last time our conference board met, we appointed people to be delegates to go to Garner for those days in April. And it all changed shortly after that. It's going to be, from what I've been talking with them in Charlotte, it's going to be mostly in the evenings. It's not going to be all day long, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. It's going to be mostly evening online interaction. And so I have not pursued the delegates that we had talked about maybe being available to travel to Garner, because it's kind of a different skill set and a different format. And it's just been this week that you've been able to register. They've just opened the registration. So if you would like to serve as a conference delegate, we are entitled to nearly a dozen, really, if we count based on all members, not just active members. So we could appoint, and they also said that there's no fee at all, which usually is a factor in our sending delegates. So we've got at least 10 or 12 delegates we could appoint. And if you're interested in serving, why don't you come to me before I come to you, because I don't know who you are. If you would have a few evenings in April, in that third week of April, that you could represent us and interact online for that. So let me know, because we have not formally appointed our delegates yet, and we need to do that post haste now that we've had our meeting here today. So if you're interested and want to serve, just let me know. We probably have a place for you. And why don't we ask for a motion now then to receive the report of ACGC Executive Director? Yeah, Jim Lee. And the second was down here? Yeah. Okay, Don Rutan. Don Russell. Well, you think it's confusing. When I was working there, there was both of them were in the building, and I made more than a few mistakes, as I usually do. Anyway, all in favor of that motion to receive the report, please say aye. Opposed, no, and it's carried. You've got several pages starting on 15 in the book of Numbers. There's a book in the Bible called Numbers. It doesn't have as many numbers as we do in ours. They called that book, it was a very uninspiring name because there's some great stories. You know, the Balaam's mule story is in there, and the spies going out story is some great stories in Numbers, but who's going to pick up a book called Numbers? Well, anyway, they numbered the people at the beginning and at the end of the book, so that's how they named the book. But this is what's been happening in our treasury. Some of you might know that for a half a century, Bryce Sherrill faithfully monitored the books and did our treasury work for this conference. When he was unable to continue that several years ago now, Daniel McGee has been our interim placeholder. I'll keep things going, he said, but I'm not a treasurer. It's not my skill set, but in the interest of keeping things going. So he has, and we've ministered for several years. Last year, he felt like he really needed to step down from that, and so we recruited him as vice president, and he was elected to that position last year. So he was on the ballot. That's a 2-year term. And the board appointed Tony White a year ago, and he's been serving, and this has been a year to research the records way back into Bryce's administration to try to find out any designations and what these numbers mean, and the kind of research we really have not been able to do, but we need to do moving forward if we're going to do any kind of aggressive ministry and using the funds. We've got to find out what kinds of restrictions are on what funds and all of that. So Tony has been busy, and he wouldn't profess to be trained as a treasurer. He's worked for Corning as an IT guy for many years. So he's good with numbers and he's good with the computer, but he has really, really helped us. And our board meetings this year, we've tried to pour through this stuff and figure out, make sure everything is assigned in the right place. And we couldn't have done that without all the hours of research that Tony has done. And so, and even with all the research, I'm not saying we have every answer yet. John has helped him. We've gone way back in the minutes of Piedmont meetings for many, many years, 25 and 30 years back in some cases. So we're really trying to get current enough so that we can move forward with confidence, and that's our goal. So I don't know what Tony wants to call to your attention here today in this report, but he sure wins the championship for giving you data. This is more than anybody I've been in the conference now since 91, and I've never seen this much information made available. So he wins the championship for giving you information, which we are very grateful for. So Tony, whatever you want to say about this by way of reporting, I don't think they'll grill you too much because we're all overwhelmed at the information.
I'm a bit twiddler, not a bean counter. And when you give a bit twiddler a new program and some new data, this is what you get. Sorry. I aspire to be as clear and concise as Bryce was. That's where I'm hoping to get, but it'll take me a little while. Really, the stuff for Blue Ridge Chapel, we've been accounting for that separately. They actually have a separate bank account. And so that's the first 3 sets of numbers that you see there, a balance sheet, an income statement, and then some of the transactions that we did through the year. I'm including the detail as much so that you real bean counters can hold me accountable. Make sure I'm doing stuff right. Like I said, I wrote some software when I worked for Caldwell County government. We did fund accounting and Mike, thank you. All right, now I'm really intimidated. I wrote some fund accounting software, familiar with some of the real general stuff, but again, those of you that do this for a living, please hold me accountable as I'm putting this stuff together. So then we start on page 21 and we start looking at some of the stuff for our conference ministries. The first thing we had to go through was make sure we had identified and located and had access to all of our accounts. Wells Fargo
if you read the news, they're kind of maybe don't have the greatest reputation. And we think some of that may have been contributing to the difficulty we had. They actually made us file articles of incorporation with the North Carolina Secretary of State as a nonprofit entity before they would allow access to our own money. So we had to go through that. That's actually accounted for in one of our miscellaneous funds. It took $60 to file that. I think that's a process that a lot of our churches have done. I know we've got it at the regional level. We just hadn't done it at the conference level yet. So that is there. If you look us up on the Secretary of State's website now as a nonprofit corporation, we're there. But you can see that we think we've identified all of our CDs that Bryce had set up for us. If anybody has any indication otherwise, please let us know. The Wells Fargo account that I spoke of had actually had zero activity for long enough that Wells Fargo was contemplating starting the process of forfeiting it to the government. And then it really would have been a pain in the butt to go get. So luckily we forestalled that. So we've got the balance sheet there. You can see our CDs. We've got a couple of checking accounts with First Horizon. We've got the money market account and then the checking account. The other thing that I'd like to point out is if you turn to page 23, we found some things that we thought were promises that we had made not only to others but to ourselves that we hadn't necessarily been following through on. Strictly oversight, strictly understandable. But when it came to dispersing some of the interest from the Hyoka CDs, and that's what you can see as our big expenditures. When you look at expenses, if you look at Berkshire Christian College for the Gordon Conwell Professorship and the support, if you look at the Berkshire Institute for Christian Studies, those were actually trying to catch up on promises we had made to ourselves and to those organizations about how we were going to spend the interest money from the proceeds from Hyoka. So we had 10 years of catching up to do on that. That looks big because it was. And then if you look, the other big expense that jumps out is to the region. We had actually budgeted monies on a yearly basis towards that Appalachian Scholarship Fund. And going back through the checkbook, I couldn't find that we'd ever written any checks to fulfill those promises. So we were catching up on that too. So to the best of our ability, we've identified all of the promises that we think we've made and done our best to fulfill them. Norm actually called out on another one that was a little iffy. Norm, I hope we've got that resolved. If not, let me know. We want. Okay. So that's why it looks like we spent a lot of money this year, is really it was catching up on 10 years of promises that we were trying to make sure we were current on. The rest of the stuff, things like the general journal, again, that's so that the people who really know what they're doing can take a look at this and make sure I'm doing things right. I'm just the scorekeeper, not an accountant, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. No. So if there's any questions, I'm certainly would do my best to answer them. If it's not something you want to talk about, here, my email is twhite17@gmail.com. Send me an email. Let's talk about it. I'm certainly open to feedback. Next year, things will look a little different because I'm getting used to the program. I'm cheap, I'm simple, and so I try to make things really inexpensive and easy to understand. And I'm not there. I'm not where I want to be. I'm not where you folks deserve me to be in terms of presenting these reports yet. But next year, I'll try to get closer. Try to aspire to what Bryce was handing you guys for reports and how he was accounting for things. So if there's any questions, like I say, willing to take them. And if not, you can see me afterwards, send me an email. I'm glad to have a dialogue, especially with folks that know more than I do. Thank you. In a warped sense, this was kind of fun getting some of this stuff together. So. And if this is how Tony gets his kicks, far be it from us to deprive him of that privilege. But it has been a huge help because it's a lot of time, as you can see, and research and making sure that we're as accurate as we can be with everything we're committed to as a conference. Any questions before we receive that report? Or do we have a motion to receive the treasurer's report? Okay, Robin Copeland. Second? Seconded by David. All in favor, then please say aye. Opposed, no. And it's carried. So now we're up to page 31, I believe it is, in the book. And Karen, after this, I'm going to give, if you want to comment on the WHFM, will be right after the mission board, even though it may not be that way on the page, because the nominating committee stuff actually takes us into new business. So anyway, on page 31 in the book is the mission board report. And let me just kind of summarize it for you. One of the biggest things we've been doing at the mission board is trying to encourage the newer church pastors. We started it a couple of years ago by getting together on site at one of the newer church locations, churches that have been planted within the last dozen years or so. And that kind of got aborted. It's hard enough to schedule anyway with the schedules of those guys, some of whom are bivocational and all the things you're working with. But it was well worth it anytime we did it. Well, we weren't able to do that this year, which has been our biggest activity. And we also hoped out of that not only to be able to pray for one another, but maybe to get some ideas about moving forward with church planting, what it would take, and kind of pick their brains, get some opportunity for that. So that didn't happen much this year. But as the restrictions begin to melt away, I think we look forward to doing that again in the future. We'll be scheduling those. Blue Ridge Chapel, as we said earlier, did go forward this season. And of course, that's a unique church plant in that the conference is doing it. And I will say the conference doesn't have to have as much hands-on activity now. Like the conference president doesn't have to cut the grass every week, which is a blessing because he lives 42 miles away from the chapel. But it's been more and more the core group of faithful folks who are up there that have kept things going. This year, you probably didn't see it in the treasurer's report, but you will if you look for it. In the Blue Ridge Chapel stuff, we got the roof on one of the buildings got replaced and repaired this year. We did some maintenance stuff. Next year, they're talking about tackling the fellowship hall type building. That's the larger building just to the right of the chapel, and making that more usable. Because one of the things that happened this year was on the first Sunday of the month, they started doing a covered dish, I guess we'd call it around here. And so they just are enjoying getting together. And so there was a sense of community that happened that got it and appreciated this year, kept moving forward, even though a lot of outreach, of course, didn't happen in a pandemic year. So Jerry's here today. Robin and Pam are here today. They're the firsthand people. And if you have any questions about what's going on or when it's reopening in the spring, which usually is about the middle of April, but any questions you have, you can direct to them. But that's what's been going on at Blue Ridge Chapel, and we're just grateful for the opportunity. If you didn't hear, about 7 or 8 years ago, the people who were the last ones using it just gave us the keys and said, we can't pay the bills anymore to keep. And there were some bills that were quite a bit past due. So we paid several $100s worth of bills that were owed and took over the building, which had been recently renovated. And the building was in beautiful shape. There just wasn't a church there. And so we made it a preaching station since that time. And you can almost say this year, maybe it officially became a church because they took in members. And we didn't have a process for doing that because there wasn't a church. So the conference board actually voted to receive the members. And so it's a good thing. God is doing good things in his way and in his time at the chapel. But whenever you're up there in the area, some of you stay on the campgrounds over weekends if you have property up there. It'd be encouragement if you stop by for the 11 o'clock worship service there. They'd love to see you. Anyway, that was the chapel part of it. And then in the last paragraph, we mentioned Margaret. As you know, most of you, I'm sure, are tied in through Carmen Norris and other ways and know that she's had a tough year. And her pastor is here, Travis. He could fill you in on any information. I talked to her sister this week as recently, and So she continues to battle. There's been some wins along the way, and there's still some struggle going on. Pat says she really, really, really wants to come to church. Her goal is to get to church as soon as possible. So be praying, keep praying for Margaret. She's so faithful, but she's had major health issues the last few years. And the rest of our committee is listed there at the bottom of the page that works on the conference mission board. The title, what is a mission board and why do you call it that? That's because of our bylaws from years ago. Section 9, Article 7 says they are to oversee all the mission and evangelistic work sponsored by the conference. So that's why really it's become a church planting oversight committee. Any questions about the mission conference board? We elect the chairperson for that board, like most of our boards and committees, as delegates every year, and then the rest of the personnel are appointed. So if you would like to serve on this or any of the others that you hear reports from or see on the ballot where we elect chairman, let us know, because the very first meeting of our conference board, which will be within the next few weeks, we'll be filling out the committees again this year. So let us know if you'd like to serve. We'd love to have you do that. Okay, could we have a motion to receive this report then? Okay, Todd Sherwood moves to receive it. Is there a second? Way in the back. Janet DuBois. Okay, all then in favor say aye. Opposed, no. And it's carried. Okay, you got nominating committee and budget in there. That'll be the first items when we get into new business. But on page 35, Karen has submitted a report concerning the WHFM as conference president. Tony will think I'm showing favorites if I give you the mic down here, but save traffic.
I miss our ladies. It's been a really hard year. Women are relational. I know some men are too, but it's been a really hard year to not be able to see our ladies. But our ladies have been faithful. We have been able to use some of the money we might have used for officers' expenses to send to other worthy places like Penny Crusade. And so we're very thankful for that. We did not have our annual meeting this year because the average age of our attendees, really, we didn't think it was a good idea. Just to keep everybody safe so that next year we can be together. But we have wonderful ladies that are giving ladies, and we currently have a call out. I think it was Croatia that we were helping. Is that right, Robin? And so if there's anything I can do for anybody, I'll help you out. But we just have wonderful ladies, and I'm anxious to see them again soon.
Okay, any further questions? It's page 35 in the written report in the book. Okay, we have a motion to receive. Who hasn't had your name in the record yet? Here's your big chance. There you go. And a second? Second from Travis. All in favor of receiving the WHFM report, say aye. Opposed, no. And it's carried. There are a couple of reports that we don't have in writing in the book, the youth board and our CE work. And let me just, Richard didn't make it, right? Richard Waters, he's not in the house. I don't see him. So they have been doing stuff online. He's been tossing out some ideas to them, and they've been working through what it's going to take to move forward this year, not only in the camping program, but in other areas. And I'll just say on behalf, because I get included in their online chats, that there has been a set of guidelines that the regional youth has adopted for operating the camp protocol because of all the COVID restrictions, and it's going to be even when we get back to normal, it's going to be different. And so they've responded to that at the conference level and processing it. We are still very much excited about the prospect of starting a work and wilderness week of camp, which would be for older teens. Our older teens are involved in various ways in our first week of July conference camp, but it really is a junior camp with some tracks and special training programs for older teens. But the target is for junior campers, because we've had what we used to call GA, and now we call Camp Appalachian for the older teens, the regional camp right there in the same place. But we would like to do a Work in Wilderness Week with, because that's kind of a leadership development specialty. And they're well along in that process. We might have even been doing it this year had not the pandemic hit. But we're very, very close on that. We have leadership kind of lined up and designated. And so things are happening on the youth board, and Richard really is doing a good job of keeping them on track. And so Richard Waters is the chair of that, and the rest of the board gets appointed every year. I don't know that I can answer. There's a couple people who are on that youth board that are in the room, but I don't know we can go into a lot of detail for you. But do you have a question that you need to know what's going on with the youth? If not, we'll just let that read into the record that I gave a few comments on behalf of the youth board, and we won't do a formal reception. We have done more in the area of training seminars in this conference than any other conference or region that I know of in the last few years. In fact, in this very room, I remember the one we did for children. It was really terrific, probably 6-7 years ago now. We did one for millennials, reaching millennials. That was very interesting and exciting, and that took place here. Did we do an adult one here? I can't remember now if we did or not. We did either 2 or 3. But then we did the one for technology in ministry, I think was the title that was called. And that happened to Gordon Conwell a couple of years ago in April, I think it was. But it's really terrific that we have churches close enough so that we have a viable mass of people to reach, because many places in the denomination, they just don't. We can do those kinds of things. And like I say, Christian Ed was always called for years, and there are other titles that people use it now, but training seminars to move us forward in the church. We're close enough to do it. We have the funding we can find and put in place to do it. So I think it's just a matter of stewardship that we keep offering that. But I'm very pleased that we've been doing CE things and training events for the last several years. I wish it were happening at all levels, but it can't. But just because we have this opportunity, we want to make sure that we keep at it. So the last one that we did, we asked David Richards, who has an inside track at Gordon Conwell, to coordinate and set it up. And so he has the title of the CE chair. And I've asked him if he would consider doing another one for the reasons that I just said. We're here. We enjoyed it because of the Zoom component last time. Probably nearly half the participants did it online, the training we did at Gordon Conwell. And the rest of us got a tour of the campus and free donuts and, good stuff that way. And so it hasn't been only within the last week or so that I've been talking with David about this. And so he reported in by text the other day, says, I have kind of half an idea. And I said, well, why don't you give us your half idea so we can give you some feedback on it and talk about it. So David is here, and I'd like you to hear from him of some speculation on what might happen in the next year or so by way of a training event. So if you got any even half ideas, that'll work. Well, I'm close enough to grab a mic because especially if they're following on, you should get in front of this camera if they're going to be following us on YouTube.
Well, we did the other training at Gordon Conwell in 2019, which we did stuff on some technology and ministry, which was fairly well received, although we were going to have a video of that conference that was going to be posted online. However, that never happened because the person at Gordon Conwell that was doing it was swamped, and now he no longer works at Gordon Conwell. So I'm not sure where that file went. I'm going to attempt to find it and see what happened to it. We did not do one in 2020 for obvious reasons, unfortunately. I do want to try to do another event this year. I'm not sure dates on it. I do have permission to do one. I need to get a hold of some of the professors that we've got to see about getting them on board to see about getting that set up. So my half an idea was that I wanted to try and do something COVID related, basically something on getting, doing ministry to, people during the pandemic. Maybe I was hoping to get some of our counseling faculty on board with that, just to kind of talk about, grief counseling and talk about trauma, talk about all of these, various things that are related to that. I'm still waiting to hear back from them to see if they are willing to do that. And if they are not able to, I will come up with another idea and we will do something else. So like I said, it's half a good idea, and I am working on just in the beginning stages of putting the logistics together on that. And as soon as I can get some definite things set in place, then we will communicate that to the rest of you.
So talk to David if you've got some half or quarter or 1/3 ideas that you could patch together, because I think that would be good. Everything has changed this last year. And one of the ways that I know that is we'll just receive the report and make comments on it. We don't have a written report. We won't take a vote on it. But I was asked a little over a year ago to contribute a chapter to a book that is to honor Dr. David Dean. And my assigned chapter, which was to be turned in by April of this year, was on the future of the evangelical church, optimistic or pessimistic, and the future of the Advent Christian church. So that was my chapter. And what I started was, I'd go to sites or anything Christianity Today or any of the publications, people speculate on the future of the church and the future of evangelicalism all the time. So I was collecting that kind of stuff, and then COVID hit, and the future for all church ministry has changed radically in the last year. We're thinking, I guess, in some ways, a lot more short term. What's going to happen as we recover from what happened this last year in the church? And so anyway, I think it would be a great topic. And I'm going to ask for an extension on my chapter that I'm writing, because everything's changed in the last year. The future looks different. It doesn't look totally bleak. I'm basically an optimist, but my goodness, how do you factor in what's happened in the last 12 months when you're projecting the future of a denomination or of the evangelical church? Sufficiently broad topic. I guess I could say anything I felt like saying, but you'd like to have a studied opinion a little bit. So anyway, everything's changed, and something on helping us reboot after COVID would be a terrific topic. So that's the reports, the two that are listed on the agenda that are not in the book. Now we're going to take a break and move on into new business. And just before the break, I want to give you one more thing. You can talk to any of these people. You can look at this layout of the campground, which is really quite lovely, and see where the red are the buildings that are proposed. They're going to happen, I guess, and the green up here are where the new girls' cabins are going to be. So you can look at this schematic up here. You can let the resolutions people know if there's a resolution you think needs to be included. And one more thing. The handout that you have is the two items of business that aren't really our standard ones. Usually, we always do the nomination committee and the ballot and the vote for officers, and we always do the budget, adopt the budget. So that's in there. In the call of the meeting, there were two other motions that came from our executive board, and basically they had to do with funding so that we could get booted up as soon as possible on the campground, especially the girls' cabins, because we're in a very tenuous situation, as Bill said, and running camps with the girls housed the way that they are. And so it involved those two motions. The second one has to do with using some of the HIOCA money, and it explains that our return on those CDs, if you have CDs invested now, you're not surprised to know it's pretty small. And by the way, the reason there are all those banks in our treasurer's report is it was roughly $400,000 that was generated when the property was sold at HIOCA just over 20 years ago. And the FDIC at that time, which insures your bank deposits, was only like $100,000 per deposit. So we had to be in 4 different banks at least. So Bryce was doing, he was a Bank of Granite guy, which has changed names about 70 times since then. But it would have been easier for him to just put it in Bank of Granite, but we had to be dispersed all over the place. And so that's one of the reasons why it's kind of complicated tracking down where the funds are. That has been raised now. So we talked on the executive board about maybe consolidating, having 1 or 2 less banks perhaps with the funds. But the second motion suggests that we use $100,000 of that fund for this project at the regional camp. The return on that I'll explain why this happened. I've got just a couple minutes till one of us is going to quit. Bill came to me and we talked about, is there any way that we can find a way to have the conference help us get these cabins built up as soon as possible? And I said, well, probably not without using some of the High Oak money, but we're getting almost no return on that already. And he said, well, what if we gave you free rental for your camps? And I said to him, well, you know, we're talking about a second week. We want to do a work in wilderness, which won't be a large number. So that means the rent wouldn't be really high because it's based on head count. And typically for our camp, if we have like 60 or 70 on the grounds that first week of July, it's maybe $2,500 or in that range is the rent from the region. So a full-size camp, $2,500. Probably for a smaller group, it would be less than that. So we're talking 3,500, probably 4,000 a year. That credit would be worth to us. Anyway, based on that, we went to the executive board of the conference and came up with these two motions. We feel like that we could handle 150,000. In the meantime, some of you who were in this room for the regional meeting know that they came back with a counter that they felt it would be more responsible if you're going to enter into a contract like this to have a date when it was met, when it was completely satisfied on the region's side. So they came up with a date of 25 years rent-free for up to 2 weeks that we would have. So that has already been ratified, which makes one of our motions a little bit dated already. But what we are going to do today, because in the call to the meeting, these motions went out, and they've already been made by the executive board, and a committee motion doesn't need a second, so it's going to go right into action. There's two motions under new business that'll go right to the floor. We'll handle them as is, which means they can be amended within reason. I think they can be amended, but we're not going to replace them as we start. We're going to take the original motion, take amendments, and we discussed the possibility of a couple of amendments. One of them, recognizing that they've already said there will be a time limit on the free rental arrangement, 25 years. And then more recently than that, within the last week, the numbers have come in that told us it's going to be in the 180,000 range, slightly over that, to actually construct the 3 cabins. And so we will entertain a motion if you think it's viable. Our treasurer thinks it's doable, but we can talk about that in the floor discussion if you want to. I don't know how much you want to go into it, but we would entertain an amendment that said we would go to 180,000 from the conference and ask for another 5 years of free rent in order to do that. Because if you do the math, 150,000 is worth about 30,000 a year, 30,000 every 5 years rather than free rent. So if we do another 5 years, it'd be about the equivalent of what they're saying. For every 5 years, for every $30,000 you give us. So that would be the simplest way to say it, to amend the motion to raise it to 180,000 and ask in exchange for that we be granted 30 years from the region. The region would have to, they got to respond quickly because the bids that Bill is sitting on right now are 15 days and then it could go up again. So the region is going to have to do something quickly. And I would entertain, I think we might need another motion that would authorize the conference executive board to handle any further negotiations in the spirit of this original bid. I mean, we couldn't up it to 400,000 and say build all the boys' cabins too, but within the spirit of this, to finalize this motion to make it happen, that your executive board could meet with the regions, whoever make it for them, and hammer it out. There's stuff like a soil test before they can respond, and they got 15 days hold on this bid. Things are going to start happening quickly if we go ahead with this. But I'm going to recommend that we consider going to 180,000 and ask the region for 30 years on that thing. That's basically it. If you're doing the math year by year, if it's a maximum of 4,000 a year benefit at today's rate, of course the rental rates could go up in the next 4 years. You're talking maybe maximum benefit we get with $20,000 instead of the $1,000 we're giving for each 5 years. But then again, there's a lot more benefit because we are them. And we'll be having the camps, we'll be using the cabins. The illustration that was on the handout in front of you did not factor in the fact that, by the way, we're giving away the principal. It just is what your return is. And so our return would be pretty big, but in exchange for that return, we're also giving away the principal. There's a slight difference there. But if we sit on the principal, and we would earn the very minimal interest on 150,000, it'd be maybe 30 or 40 bucks a year right now. So, you know, a lot of stuff to think about. That's why we're giving you 15 minutes. You'll think better if you eat a donut. It really helps. It'll really help your cogitative powers. So eat a donut, look at the schematic of the campground, get in a corner and pray, consult with your wisest friends. And that's going to be part of new business. And it'll only take as long as you want it to take. We've got to decide either thumbs up or thumbs down, one way or the other. And you know what? A lot of the people in this room also represent the region as well as the conference. So we're all in this together, basically. We got to make a decision. So that's where we're at. First thing when we come back, we'll do the nominating committee report, election of officers, budget, and then move forward with these items of business and business resolutions. So that's it. So now I've talked until I got 9 minutes past 11. So let's say 11:25, we'll reconvene and expedite the new business. Thanks. We've already tried that. Okay, in 90 seconds, we're going to start business, which means your conversation is going to have to end anyway. So if you could join us, that'd be good. "90 seconds. While we're coming in, let me mention a couple things that came up in the break. First, regarding the Treasury, we are not a part of United Ministries. It's just the design of it. United Ministries is everything from the regional through the national to the international, everything from the regional on out, the rest of the world. So it starts on Whitson Hill Lane and where Bill lives in Taylorsville, and everything from there to the ends of the earth is United Ministries. The conference, which is our area here in Western North Carolina, and from there on back through the local church, is not part of United Ministries. We support United Ministries. But so anyway, where does our revenue come from then? And it comes from donations from the churches and occasionally individuals, but mostly the churches decide that they'll help us out, and they support us through the year, and they send in the funds. So that's how it happens. We don't do a lot of appeal for it. We don't want to undermine United Ministries in any way. But there's churches in this conference who faithfully give every year. I think some of them figure out a per capita basis. Based on membership, they give a certain designated amount. Some of them give more than once through the course of the year. But it's strictly a donation basis from our churches, plus funds that we have had in reserves and stuff but over the years. So that's what happens there. And some of you have asked, when we get to the budget, how would this business item affect our budget? And I can tell you generally, we have a youth board, and we write out checks to the youth board for them to spend on camping ministry. And so it will affect our operating budget favorably from our perspective over the years, because say you're going to do a week of camp, and you need $2,500 for camp rental. That's part of your budget. You need maybe $3,000 to pay all your staff. You need a couple thousand for your groceries, another $1,000 for supplies or events, like if you go off to swim somewhere and stuff. So you got a $7,000 or $8,000 budget, say, to run your week of camp. Well, the rental part you don't have anymore, unless you decide to go find another camp, which wouldn't be very smart campground to rent. But so the $2,500 out of that may represent a third of the cost, say, of what we do for a week of camp. So it does that affects our operating budget, right? We write a check out to the youth board, and we won't say, well, just don't worry about that anymore. You can spend the money however you want to. That won't happen, because like Jim Lee is directing our youth camp, and he tries to take them to Philadelphia to watch a Phillies game, and load them up on a bus. Let's go. That's not going to happen. We're expecting that it'll be a zero-sum game for you when you don't have to pay rent. Correspondingly, you get less from the cost to offset it. Because, of course, a lot of the offset for camp comes in the registration fees, but not all. Pretty heavily, probably at least 50% happens in our camps is subsidized by the conference. So anyway, that's how that will work. So yeah, it'll have a favorable impact on our operating budget year after year, and invest it in other ways. We'd like to do more things during the year for our youth, for instance, that are not just the summer camp and retreats and stuff. So yeah, David.
So does that mean the individual registrations for each camper is going to be less?
Not necessarily, because they're already about the lowest in the business right now. You can't go to Camp Anywhere for what we're charging, let's put it that way. But it will mean that we would have funds to use in other areas, which is good, because we can't tap on reserves that we've already spent to build those cabins. So I'm speaking as one person, but I assume when the board deals with budget items, we'll say, you know what, that's less money that we have to subsidize the camp with, basically. And we can use that in other areas. Because it's not like we raise our budget every year in gift income, because we don't. And we will have made our pool of reserves quite a bit shallower when we do this. So anyway, that's all part of the way that it works. So yeah, it will affect operations. You can roughly say to the tune of between $2,500 and $4,000 a year, because we haven't seen in our operating budget yet We've had a request for between 4,000 and 5,000 to run a work and wilderness camp, but it hasn't showed up in a budget yet. And it'll be a lot easier to honor that request once we get this, because that request goes down by maybe $1,500, whatever it would cost them to rent for their. I mean, I think like 25 would be a great group to start with for a work and wilderness. So we would be paying less than half, if of the rental typically for that. But we'd still need a place to lodge them and stuff and a place to work from. Anyway, a lot of questions that are not answered, but yes, that's how the system works. And so, it will affect our operating budget, and we would like to see it moved around for other ministry within the operating budget. I think that's basically what's going to happen. Okay, rather than have our credentials committee walk the aisle again, they did have one new delegate to be seated, and since we have a voting block now that can receive them, I don't know if it makes any difference to you. It's Jim Tabor, so that might make a split decision. I'm not sure. Anyway, we need to seat one more delegate. If we could have a motion to do that. Jim can't make the motion because he's not seated until you vote him. So. Okay, comes from the credentials committee itself. Is there a second? Second from Robin. All in favor say aye, and it's carried. Page 32 in the book is the nominating committee, the first report of new business. There is one typo in here, except it was typed right, I know, because I was at the computer sweating over this thing. But when you get down to Board of Missions and it says chair, the chairperson is what we're electing, and then it says one, and the year term part of that got scooted over under treasurer. If you know computers and their aggravation, you know how that happened. It looked good when it was sent out from my computer, but somewhere between mine and John's, it got received this way. So that year term that's under treasurer that is extraneous belongs over there under Board of Missions. It's a 1-year term. So if you want to correct that, make it more understandable. But I think the ballot pretty much is the way it got sent. On the back page of the ballot, or maybe on a second page, I think it's the back page of the ballot, there's a little bit more information, and that tells you who is already, the next page, 33, who is already served because they were elected last year. We've got a lot of stuff on 2-year terms. So the VP's not up this year for the Northern District. Secretary's not up. And no, that did get.
That got completely garbled. I'm sorry for that. I was trying to figure out what it was that was written there.
Okay. Let me tell you so you can put a slash mark. There's no respect for Travis Hutchison. He shouldn't be respected at all. Or Jim Lee or Mary Roller. Those are the 3 who are on the ministerial committee already because they were elected last year and got a second year. Jimmy Duffy and Dave Ross. So just slash after Mary's name before Jimmy Duffy's. We are the 2 this year that did the phone calling for nominations. So that.
Thank you for clarifying that. I didn't know I served on nomination.
No, you did not. We'll respect you anyway, but you weren't part of the respectfully submitted. So if you want to move respectfully submitted over Jimmy's name and put a big slash after Mary Roller's name, you'd have it pretty much. That's the way it is. So those first 3 names there at the bottom on page 33 are already serving on ministerial. And Jimmy helped me. I'm glad he did a lot of the phone calling for nominations. Okay, what we have submitted is what we have in recent years. One name who is willing to serve in each of these positions. However, we're going to be, we need to receive this report and make it our ballot. And after it becomes our ballot, we can take nominations from the floor. So is there a motion to receive the report of the nominating committee and make it our ballot? That's Bill, and a second from Robin. Robin and Jim both seconded, so we got a second and a third. Okay, all in favor say aye. Opposed, no. So what you're looking at here now is a ballot, and John has been industrious and he's printed these off. So we can do a written one if you'd prefer, if we end up adding names from the floor. So we can do that. Or we could do it if you still want to do a written because you want to write in a name that doesn't have a ghost of a chance because nobody else knows. But you have that privilege as delegates. So we will open it up now for, I'm not going to read office by office. I'll just say anyone who has a nomination from the floor that you know is willing to serve in one of these offices, we will be glad to put them in nomination at this time. Are there any other nominations for Any of these positions, the ones on page 32. If there are none, you have a couple of options here. You can ask that we do a written ballot. You have a chance to mark it. We can distribute them. We didn't want to do it in advance because we're trying to put as few potential COVID germs in your hands as we can at any one time, but we'll pass them out. Or you can ask that our secretary cast an elective ballot for the slate that you're looking at. Either one. Okay. So Robin Copeland asks that puts a nomination. There was a second from Norm? Okay, so the motion on the floor then is that this ballot that you're looking at on page 32 become our elective ballot of the delegates, and that the secretary would note that in the record. Any further discussion? Just before I call for the vote, I want to tell you, if you have an interest and you want to serve in any of these positions, any of these committees, we've got to fill out the committees within the next few weeks. We would love to have people who have an interest and that we don't have to twist any arms. That would be a wonderful thing. So if you have an interest, we're wide open. This is not, we don't want to do anything by executive order. This is not Joe Biden's conference. We don't just do it we would love to have the people come forward and volunteer. So anyway, all in favor of the motion to cast one elective ballot, say aye. Opposed, no, and it's carried. Page 34 has the treasurer's proposed budget, and actually several of the executive committee works together, put their heads together every year, and that's the budget committee. So what you have in those columns is last year, the budget that we adopted and the actual, and then the current year we're in, because we adopt a budget every year that is really 9 months out. We're looking today at the 2022 budget. When you met last March, you adopted the 2021 budget. So it's a bit speculative, I guess you'd say, but it's basically the same budget we recommended for this year. Now, it's more likely to get tweaked next year if we get these cabins up and we get things moving, we get a worker and wilderness camp. That could all happen before we meet next year. Or Jesus could come back, and that would really change things for the better. But the fact is, we may well do some tweaking because this represents how we propose to do our operating budget for the year. But we're saying right now, we can't tell you any better than we guessed last year when we met to do the 21 budget. So this year we're meeting to do the 22 budget, and it may end up, of course, it'll be administered by the executive board, but it'll probably look different next time around, but it's really the same one as last year for this time. So is there a motion? We served as a budget committee, and this is our recommendation, but it'd probably be a good idea for someone to move the adoption of this budget. The top line is the total. So we're talking about an operating budget of $16,975. Someone will put a motion to that effect. Okay. That will happen anyway. But there's a motion to adopt this budget. It was a $16,975 for 22. Is there a second? Yeah, Jim Lee seconded it. Any discussion? We could try to tell you what any of these items mean. Some of them we're still finding out ourselves because in some areas the titles are old. Let me say this as I look at it. Blue Ridge Chapel, you can look at 2020, that year's done, and you can see we didn't have to subsidize them a bit this year. We've always subsidized them. You know, when we reopened, it was a preaching station, and we paid $50 a week, whether you drove 2 miles or whether you drove 60 miles to speak that week. We didn't have an honorarium breakout. It was just $50 a week, pay the bills, maintenance needed, all that kind of stuff. Now the offerings that they are receiving are basically covering. There's a separate checking account, as a matter of fact. That first page in the Treasury report tells you about it, and then the transactions. But we're at the point right now where Blue Ridge Chapel, we've got a subsidy proposed in here, but last year we didn't need to use it, so they're going good. However, they may need something more to move forward. Maybe when they get into this fellowship hall renovation and stuff, they'll need some more serious bucks, more than they can cover as a small congregation, and we want to be there for them when that happens. So anyway, any other questions about this page? If not, then all in favor of adopting this as our proposed budget for 22, say aye. And opposed, no. And it's carried. Okay. Now I'm going to ask David if he'll come forward. He really could have done that last one, actually, adoption of the budget. We've got a couple of other items before we even do resolutions. We've got the two that you have in writing, and we'll take a little bit of talking about. We've got the prayer one, and so he's got a few things we need to hear him for as he guides us through the new business part. And as Robin is down here to correct him whenever he misspeaks.
So we'll go ahead and do the proposals now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any of the proposals?
All right. Well, you've heard a lot already about the two proposals that we'll be looking at first. It's not close enough. Okay. Can you hear me now? What kind of cell service do you have? No. All right. So you've heard a lot already about the proposals, and we've talked about what was presented to you, and that needs to be presented to you again now. But we've also heard that there is some revelation of new actions that have taken a new cost, and those need to be considered in light of reviewing these proposals. So that means, as David was talking about earlier, there may be an occasion where you would like to recommend an adjustment to these. But we need to consider what was handed out to all first, and I'll read those proposals the way they were. So the first proposal coming from the executive board says, propose that the Piedmont Advent Christian Conference provide $150,000 to the Appalachian AC Association for purposes of constructing the 3 proposed girls' cabins on the regional campground in return for receiving up to 2 weeks of camp rental forgiveness annually in perpetuity. So that is our first proposal.
Okay, so it's on the floor. It doesn't need a second because it came from a committee from the executive board. Now, at this point, there are 2 things that probably, to make it practical, because the region doesn't have $31,000 available to add to this to do the job for right away. In the top line, we would be open to an amendment that would say would provide, instead of 150,000, 180,000. We'd be open to that amendment. And at the end, the last 2 words, instead of in perpetuity, we would recommend that it say for the next 30 years. So we'd be changing the last 2 words to for the next 30 years. And by the way, if your executive board is negotiating this, one of the things I'd throw in the mix is the years start to count as soon as the camp becomes available to rent. Because if COVID messes us up and we can't count this year, I'd rather not count this year.
Right.
I'd rather kind of really, but anyway, that's nitpicking, that small stuff. So we changed the amount. We would entertain an amendment to change the amount to 180, and instead of in perpetuity, the last 2 words, to have it say for the next 30 years. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we amend proposal number 1 to read, propose that the Piedmont Advent Christian Conference provide $180,000 to the Appalachian Advent Christian Association for purposes of constructing 3 proposed girls' cabins on the regional campground in return for receiving up to 2 weeks of camp rental forgiveness annually for the next 30 years, starting when the camp becomes available to rent.
If you want to type all that in, we'll accept that as an amendment.
I'm also advised we should strike the word girls.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, instead of girls, we just say youth cabins. Yeah, we'll do that just by common agreement of the executive board members. Even though we know we're planning at this point to use those for girls, but we'll call them youth cabins. Yep. But we do have a vested interest in like 180,000 or something. So it'd be good to have it right on our records. So we'll just say, yep.
What, Mike? John, I'll just hand it.
Oh, okay. Much paperwork. I move that we adopt the proposal reading, propose that the Piedmont Advent Christian Conference provide $180,000 to the Appalachian Advent Christian Association for purposes of constructing the 3 proposed cabins on the regional campground in return for receiving up to 2 weeks of camp rental forgiveness annually for the next 30 years, starting when the camp becomes available to rent.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? There were 3 changes to the one on the floor. That's okay. We got a second. So it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion then to what we're proposing at this point? Okay, Todd.
As the chair of the camp management committee,
Mm-hmm.
as part of that discussion, and as part of the discussion around the amendment, request that the executive council of the Piedmont Advent Christian Conference work with the camp management committee for the region directly on wording for the agreement when it's finalized, so it's memorialized as to not just term for 30 years, but it just doesn't end at 30 years, there are many additional options to that.
Yeah. Well, we can deal with that. We may need a second motion, or else we can just enter it into the record to say that the conference board will have to negotiate any further details with this motion. If it gets adopted by the delegates, obviously they can't do all the, and the reason that we wanted youth in there, I've been asked, because all the cabins on the campground now are privately used and owned or rented. They said, so we're going to just build cabins for people to stay in? I said, well, no, they're actually part of a schematic for the youth camp. It doesn't mean that adults could never use them if we're running out for a retreat, but it's certainly not for private. That's not our intention for private use. If they decide they can gain revenue from renting them, fine, but you need some nomenclature so they'll distinguish them from the cabins that currently exist on the ground. So they would be under total jurisdiction of the region and the camp management committee to decide how they're used. But we want people to know that they're not really private cabins like the ones up there now. They're bunks. They're dormitories, basically. Yes.
We always need to keep in mind, I know that this is, of course, a Piedmont conference proposal.
Yeah.
But the overall mission of the regional campground and conference center is not just to be a youth camp,
Mm-hmm.
to be a conference and training center as well.
Right.
So if people giving money, if people making donations and stuff, realize that the overall
Mm-hmm.
mission is that we want to come back to the original reason that the camp was established in the first place
Mm-hmm.
back in the 1930s. And that's to be a campground and conference center. That these cabinets will be used for training or many other things than just housing youth.
Yes, they will. But they're designed dormitory style bunk beds because our primary design for them is, all of us, well, a lot of us have stayed, say, at Camp Swanee and in the youth camp dorms. And why is this a bunk bed? Well, because you're staying in a youth. It doesn't mean they can't be used for other purposes, and they are used for other purposes. But anyway, we need just something to distinguish them from the cabins that exist there now. They're privately used. That's the only. That's not a restrictive term. It's just to help understand this is part of the envisioned new youth encampment scheme. Doesn't mean they can't use it for retreats or other things of any kind. Yes.
Read it one more time.
Okay.
With this current addition, proposed that the Piedmont Advent Christian Conference provide $180,000 to the Appalachian Advent Christian Association for purposes of constructing the 3 proposed cabins on the regional campground in return for receiving up to 2 weeks of camp rental forgiveness annually for the 30 years starting when the camp becomes available to rent, and to authorize the conference executive board to negotiate any further alterations to this agreement with the Appalachian Advent Christian Association board.
Okay, so that's a substitute motion then, because you changed some wording. Okay. So we have a substitute motion that does not describe it. Like I said, there's already been some misunderstanding on why you're building cabins for people when there's other needs that are greater, like the youth camp. Anyway.
Just being anal, wouldn't it be better to say when the cabins become available to rent instead of the camp?
If the cabins take 2 years, we're still, and we're free to have youth camp this year. We'd be okay if the clock started this year, if we're renting anyway. We would just have less lovely rental facilities in the first year. I'm fine with that. But if we can't rent at all the first year, it'd be nice to have something. But the substitute motion addresses this in 3 places. It doesn't identify what these cabins are at all in that statement, and it puts the number in line 1 to 180 and 30 years, basically starting immediately after the word annually in that last line. So that's the substitute motion. Any other discussion of that before we bring that to a vote? Yes. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've already had that misunderstanding. That's why I wanted to say, Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 We've taken the youth camp part out of it. So it's.
And the idea behind that, I mean, it stands to reason that you don't want cabins sitting up there 50 weeks out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Unused. And so outside of our conference camps, we would have the ability as a region to utilize those cabins for other events, other things that's going to just make all the plumbing work. If you could constantly be used, it's not good thing just to sit out. And so you
Right.
can utilize them on the campground outside of the 2 weeks of our conference camp.
Right. That's what's envisioned. But they're built as a part of the new expanded youth campus. If we use them for adults or leadership retreats or anything, that's fine. But we're trying to let our constituency know that they're part of the dream for the new youth campus. In no way does that restrict it to only be used. We don't put in age groups on this. I think now it leaves the onus of all that explanation to the conference rather than to the region. I think that's what they wanted it to do. So.
The only other thing I would add to that, and I know language is difficult when you work on language, but it was mentioned that the executive board would work with the executive committee of the region. I would prefer, just my preference, that it would be working with the campground committee. That's why we have our campground committee in place. The campground committee is accountable to the region, the executive committee of the region. But the campground committee represents the region, and they are the ones that we elected to handle such matters of the campground. So I would ask that the executive board of the conference work with the campground committee on any adjustments that need to be made in the future to any of the.
But that's not part of this motion. Right. You're not speaking to the motion. The motion on the floor. Oh,
Yeah.
What did you say?
In the latest version, my substitute motion ended with the statement that the conference executive board would be authorized to negotiate any further alterations to this agreement with the Appalachian Advent Christian Association board. And I think Travis is suggesting that we negotiate with the campground committee. But I would submit that any decisions that the campground committee came to would need to be approved by the board anyway. So in effect, our negotiation really is with the board.
This is exactly why we left all that out of the motion. And now that we've expanded the motion, we're into the deep weeds. But I would hate to have language be a deal killer at this point. We know who's authorized to make decisions. for the region and for the conference. And so to get into language like this and to assume because we use a word, it means it restricts the usage forever of that cabin, to me, that's kind of bizarre. But, and we're there now, and whatever the motion is, I'm sure we can find a way to live with it, but I would hate to have it be a deal breaker because we're worried about semantics of things that are really administration. They're not policy. They're administrative issues.
I think, Dave, the reason why it's going to be clarified is to just make sure that as the conference understands the, basically providing the funds, what are they providing the funds for? And what is the use of those funds being? So it's not adversarial, and I'm not taking any of that adversarial. We just want to make sure from, and he represented the camp management committee as chair.
Mm-hmm.
Want to make sure that we are charged with how we move forward with this if it is approved.
Yep. That's exactly my sentiment. That's why, since the only questions I've really had on this so far is, why do those people need more cabins? They got a bunch already. So we don't have any that can service the youth program.
I'd be happy to make
But
a
that's
further substitute motion that would simply change the ending of it to say attempting any alterations to this agreement would be negotiated with the Appalachian Advent Christian Association Camp Management Committee instead of saying board. Would that work?
it's a substitute to the substitute.
Substitute to the substitute to the substitute. Yeah.
So we need the second for whoever did the substitute.
Robin's good with that.
Okay. Why does it have to be this way? It's amazing how people like to do administration in delegate sessions. Everybody secretly has a passion to be an administrator, I guess. But that's where we're at now. So the motion before us and moved and seconded is a substitute to the substitute motion. And it basically changes the last few words to say it's the Camp Management Committee that's doing the negotiating for the region, not their board. Okay, any further discussion to that? Hearing none, we'll call for vote on the substitute to the substitute amendment. That's because that's what it is. So we still got to vote on the whole thing, but this would wipe out three categories: substitute, substitute, and amendment if we vote this. So all in favor of the changes we have made, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's carried. So now we're back to the motion as it stands, and it stands as it is read. Really been amended 3 times, but that's how it stands. You want to read it one more time before we call for a vote on the whole thing?
All right. Moved that the Piedmont Advent Christian Conference provide $180,000 to the Appalachian Advent Christian Association for purposes of constructing the 3 proposed cabins on the regional campground in return for receiving up to 2 weeks of camp rental forgiveness annually for 30 years, starting when the camp becomes available to rent, and to authorize the conference executive board to negotiate any further alterations to this agreement with the Appalachian Advent Christian Association Camp Management Committee. And seconded by Robin.
I hope you wrote that all in on your copy, your written copy, because no, I mean all the delegates who are going to go report this to their home church. I hope they'll report it anyway. So that's where it is. Any discussion to the motion as it now stands? The original motion is. Yep. What does it say? When the camp becomes, when the camp is available. I'm sorry, that's my fault. I thought what I said was we'll, as long as the camp can be rented, we'll let the clock start. Whether it has the new cabins or not. Right. Yeah, it's in the motion. It's the camp, not the cabins. When the camp becomes available to rent, the clock starts. So if they don't get built for this summer, we're still be renting the camp. And so that would be our first year of rent free. The only, really the loss there would be experienced by the conference because they'd have less facilities that they're renting for the same. thing, but they also would be getting the free rental, the 1 year checked off the list. They'd be what? Well, I mean, they're already committed. We don't know that this is going to be approved for anything beyond 25 years yet, because this is just our to the region. So, but either way, whenever the clock starts, they're trading off 30 years for 180,000, or maybe they're trading off 25 years for 150,000. We'll see. Okay, I think we've had enough discussion.
I'm just going to say that in response to what Norm was saying, wouldn't that be covered by the statement that the conference executive board is authorized to negotiate any further alterations to this agreement with the camp management? Therefore, a question of whether that should have been stated as the camp or the cabin could be a negotiated.
But the camp is in the motion. When the camp becomes available.
Camp's in motion, but the alteration possibility is also in motion.
Well, yeah, if the region would prefer that it don't start this year, that'd be fine. I don't really see a problem in the implementation. The problem is just getting this on the books so we know what we have committed to. Okay, let's call for vote then. All in favor? Do you want to vote other than verbal saying aye? You want a show of hands or anything? Or written? Or okay, all in favor then say aye. Aye. Okay, opposed no. It's carried. Okay, David, what we got that second one?
So part two of the proposal, actually a proposal of its own right, proposed that $100,000 be withdrawn from the Hyuka sale principal to be used toward the AACA investment, and the remaining $50,000 be allocated from other Piedmont Conference resources.
Okay, that's the motion, and it's been made by a committee, so it doesn't need a second. Obviously, we need an amendment to one of those two numbers. When I talked with Tony the other day about the books, it appears that we would be able to absorb the other 30,000 without invading the Hyuka funds any further. Here's a sidebar that some of you may not know. Those funds, the gain on them, the interest every year from the CDs that represents those 400,000 from the Hyuka sale, are used by vote of this convention to benefit Christian education training. Half of the gain every year goes to our own youth ministry in the conference. And the other half is split up between 4 entities. And it says in the original policy that we've got to review these 4 to make sure they're still viable and valid every year. And so the conference board once a year looks at these. But the 4 are BICS, Berkshire Institute for Christian Studies, Gordon Conwell Professorship, which is in Massachusetts, the Gordy Isaac holds right now, Berkshire Christian College generally, and then the 4th is, what is the 4th? Scholarship for the region, yeah, Regional Scholarship Fund. So those 4 benefit. Typically, the 400,000 is earning us maybe $100, I guess now, something in that ballpark. So it's much less than it was back in the day when it was established. But so every year we are supposed to divvy it up. Say if $100, it might be more than that. It was considerably more than that. So $50 of it would go toward our youth ministry in the conference, and $12.50 of it would go to each of those 4 entities. That it's not much. It used to be considerably more back in the day, in the year 2000, when CDs were earning money. But anyway, that's why we are saying, is there a better way to invest these in ministry? Not all of them. I mean, there'll still be 300,000 by this original motion. There'd still be 300,000 there to distribute among those for now. So I would say at this point, it's going to be up to the delegates to decide. But at this point, we would need to change the 50,000 to 80,000 in this motion by way of amendment to make it compatible with the other motion we just passed. But if you would prefer to take the other 30 out of the Hyoka funds, there would still be 300,000 of them remaining there. It's up to the discretion. We're thinking we don't have to invade those at this point. We may have to come back to you in another year and say we cut it too close. We got to invade to cover this investment. But for now, I would suggest that we change the 50,000 in this motion to 80,000 by way of amendment to make it compatible with the form motion we just passed. But it's up to you. So discussion, anything you'd like to do with proposal number 2? Okay, so there's a motion to amend the 50 to 80. Is there a second? Okay, let's see, way back there. I see that. Yeah. Okay. Who was it that seconded? Oh, we had a second down here too. I'm sorry. Okay, it's been moved and seconded and it's in the books for that. So we'll discuss the amendment and then vote on the amendment. That really will take care of the motion, but we're supposed to do the motion next. So the amendment, the 80,000, which will make it practical to do the one before that we just passed. Any discussion? No, we'll call for a vote on it. All in favor of it, then say aye. Opposed, no. So this now reads, read the original motion for us as amended, John, if you would, or David, either one. Read it into the record.
Move that $100,000 be withdrawn from the Hyoka sale principal to be used towards this AACA investment, and the remaining $80,000 be allocated from other Piedmont Conference resources. Moved by David Richards and seconded by Eugene Smith.
Okay, so that's the motion as it now stands as amended. We voted the amendment. Any other question on the motion? Okay, we're going to call a vote. If you don't have things to talk about, all in favor say aye. Opposed, no, and it's carried. So if you have these paper ones, it'd be a good thing to note those changes we did. There's only one on that second one, but there's 3 on the first one. Three changes, 3 different places. Okay, yeah. Other business and resolutions.
You can go first and I'll finish.
Back cleanup.
Okay, I have 2 resolutions. Whereas the Conference Prayer Project designates 2 conference churches to be lifted up in special prayer, sorry about that, each month by all conference churches throughout 2020, be it resolved that the conference continue this prayer project until the next conference meeting.
Okay, the committee has recommended this. You're moving this, right?
Yes.
The committee? Okay. Yes, Jim did. Any discussion of that? Everybody know what we're talking about? Okay, then all in favor say aye. Opposed, no. If you've never seen it, talk to your pastor or somebody. It's getting mailed to all the churches every month, and it's in bulletin insert format.
My turn. Your turn. Motion, whereas Lenore Community Church has been such a gracious host to the Piedmont Conference today by providing us a spacious and safe environment where we were able to meet all social distancing requirements, be it resolved that we give them a rising vote of thanks and applause.
All in favor, please stand. Thank you, thank you. We wanted to have it at Blue Ridge Chapel, but we couldn't accommodate that. So we are very grateful. Let's give them a hand. Maybe some year we'll be at Blue Ridge Chapel when we're allowed to not socially distance.
I don't know if this is a motion.
No, I would.
Okay.
You could let them decide.
All right. The chairman approved this. I'm just going to say this. Okay. This is the most serious of all of the resolutions. Okay. Whereas donuts have been mentioned multiple times over the course of the meeting by our conference president, be it resolved that any leftover donuts be taken home by the conference president, Dave Ross.
Please no. Please vote this one down. You should see my kitchen right now. But I do know where the LCC dumpster is, and that's where they'll go.
Did anybody count how many times he said donuts? I almost did. I should
For
have.
somebody who hasn't had one yet and doesn't need them. That's it? Yeah, we got a motion on the floor. Yeah, moved and seconded. So all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Register 1 no.
You might not have to
That's
do
correct.
this again.
No.
That's right.
Okay, that's the thanks we get. Okay, we are ready now, I believe, for the report from the ministerial committee, and then we'll be done for the day. So, Jim, if you would, a couple of years ago, we bypassed one step in this process. Come on up, Jim. I'm just killing time till you get here. Most conferences, it's the secretary of the conference that receives all the reports and then tries to assure that the ministerial committee gets them. But general conferences worked well with us on this. So we don't have the conference secretary sign them now. The ministerial committee signs them, which makes more sense because they're the oversight committee for the ministers. So now everything that you fill out, you go online and fill it out. It goes to the region. It goes to ACGC. And the copy that goes to the conference goes to Jim. And so we've cut out the middleman, and John doesn't get to sign 60-some licenses every year as a secretary. Instead, Jim Lee does. So that basically happened like 2 years ago. Okay, Jim.
Thank you. Good to see y'all here. You see my report. Pretty different year for us. And I want to take this opportunity to really praise God for our pastors and for all the adjustments that they have had to make. I'm sure all of you who trained for the ministry did not have streaming in your course load or, technology or anything like that. And so I am very grateful for guys in my church, our church. Some are right here, Todd and Brandon and Josh, who really picked up the load of streaming and doing all those things to make ministry and preaching and teaching available for our congregation. So just want to thank the Lord for the wisdom that he's given us to do these things that we never even dreamed about doing. And I'm grateful for all of you that are here today, that we can just rejoice that we are moving, I think, in some very positive directions. So we give God the glory for that. Just a few highlights in my report, and then I want to mention a couple other things. One, I'm not sure how many of you know this, but Brent Carpenter has been serving the First Advent Christian Church in Lenore since last summer, and that is working out good. I talked to Brent a couple weeks ago, and they are up over 50, I think, on Sunday mornings now, which is wonderful. We give God the glory for that. I don't know how many of you know this, that we welcome to our conference retired chaplain Carl Otis and his wife Stormy. Stormy is actually from the War, West Virginia church, and Carl comes to us through the military, and his home church was Baraboo, Wisconsin, and they have determined to retire here in Lenore, and they have purchased a home, and Carl is available for supply work. So I hope we'll see Carl in the near future. He does come to some of our Wednesday luncheons. And it's already been mentioned about the Blue Ridge Church, and grateful for Jerry and Rob and Pam and their work there. Kevin Skipworth is currently pastoring the West Bay Advent Christian Church in Panama City Beach, Florida. Roger Barker resigned the Rock Church in Concord, and I understand he's going into retirement. Chet Hart has moved to the Advent Christian Village and is now pastoring the McAlpin, Florida Advent Christian Church. And Frank Hall has moved to Florida and serves on the pastoral staff at the Advent Christian Village. I'd like to mention another person in prayer. Our dear friend Ed Neal has been undergoing a lot of Merkel cell treatments for Merkel cell cancer. For those of you who are not familiar with that, it is cancer that has come up on Ed's face. It attacks the lymph nodes. Ed had about 32, I think, identifiable areas there on his face. And as of right now, he needs 3 more treatments. He will be concluded on Wednesday. And my prayer is, and our prayer is, that this has not spread, and we're praying that Ed will have total healing. So please remember Ed along with Wes and Shirley in your prayers. I want to mention one other thing before I get to the pastors. One of our licensed ministers of our conference and a member of our church, Melody Foster, sitting back there. And back a few years ago, Melody, the Lord had been speaking to Melody about a children's home in Caldwell County. Melody and her family have been involved in a children's home up in Wilkesboro, North Wilkesboro, and it's called Ebenezer Children's Home. Maybe some of you have heard of it. Wonderful ministry, taking care of children from the community, from birth on up through high school, about 43 over there in North Wilkesboro currently. As most counties have in North Carolina and most places, a real need for foster care. There's not the foster care parenting that's coming up through the ranks. So Melody's vision many years ago was to start a children's home in Caldwell County. And we're glad to report that probably sometime, hopefully in April, May, when the ground clears up and everything, they're going to be breaking ground for the first building that will house children. And we want you to be aware of this because we would love to have your churches participate in helping in this ministry. If any of you have any questions, you can see Melody after the meeting. But this is a wonderful, wonderful way that we can really take care of our kids. And I think all of you are very aware of child abuse and the whole issue of children being abused, throughout the world. And so I pray that this home, this ministry for children will be a total success, and God will just really bless it through the years ahead. So if you have any questions about it, you can talk to Melody after the meeting, and we can make information available to you if you'd like to support, or if any of your people would like to support. Mr. President, these are ministers who currently hold ordination credentials in the Piedmont Adventist Christian Conference. And I sent this report in, and then there was other ministers that sent their reports in after this came in. So I'm going to read all the ministers' names, and we got plenty of room up here to spread out. So we want you to know who these people are if you don't already. And Dave is going to give you your card. And if you are close to someone who is not here, would you please take their card and make sure they get it? So I'm going to ask these pastors to come up if you're present and face the congregation. Glennon Balser, retired. Roger Barker. David Blythe. Floyd Boston, retired. Patrick Bradshaw. Matthew Broadway. Rob Buchanan. Jerry Burnett, retired. Brent Carpenter, retired. Johnny Carpenter, retired. Charles Marvin Casey, retired. And by the way, retired pastors do not have to fill out a report. That's worth it right there to be retired. So that's good. Bob Copeland, Luke Copeland, Robin Copeland, Robert Earp, R. Franklin Hall, retired. Chet Hart, Margaret Helms, retired. Robert E. Hodges, retired. Travis Hutchison, David C. Jones, Matt Larkin, Steve Lawson, James E. Lee, Daniel McGee, Bill Milliner, Billy Mobley, Justin Nash, Edward N. Neal, retired, Gordon A. Noble, retired, Hal Patterson, retired, Scott Filyaw, Josh Polk, David Richards, John H. Roller, Mary E. Roller, David E. Ross, Richard Russell, retired, Norm Sherwood, Kevin Skipworth, Arthur Stone, James E. Tabor, Brandon Thomas, Ronald Thomas, retired, Marshall A. Tidwell, retired, Jeffrey Walsh. I want to mention as well that we have had two pastors that were ordained into the conference last year, and we are yet to have their ordination services. One is for Luke Copeland, the other is for Brandon Thomas, and we are going to plan these as things open up this year to have their ordination services. Also, something that struck me, another prayer request. I don't know how many of you know that Luke and Lindsay Copeland are expecting a baby here in another couple of weeks. The baby has got a condition that the doctors feel that needs to be attended to right away. So within a couple of weeks, Lindsay and Luke will be going to Charlotte. And the baby, after it's born, will have immediate surgery following the birth. So this is kind of a scary time for the Copelands. So please remember them in prayer as well. Mr. President, the ministers who currently hold license credentials in the Piedmont Advent Christian Conference are as follows, and asking those folks to please come forward. Peter Awute, Brandon Clemens, Jimmy Duffy, Gary Griffith, Javier Guzman, Melody Foster, Alan Raby, Stephen Raby, and Jason Russell. Due to the virus, our ministerial committee were not able to meet this year, and we're hoping that will change this year. Mr. President, our pastors.
Glad to clarify that retirement plan. The only purpose is on the file report.
That's right. Yeah, some of us are retirement age, and we're still at it.
Anyway, I would like to ask our regional superintendent to give us a prayer for our conference credentialed ministers. Okay. Lord, we give you thanks today. It's good to be involved in your ministry, and it's good to be engaged together. There are multiple good ways of serving you as part of your church. So we thank you for each one who's agreed to serve, and there's a certain amount of discipline that's been applied to their life to achieve the credentials and to maintain them over the years, file the annual report. We thank you that these stand before us have been willing to submit to that level of accountability because they truly are serving and they want to serve you. And so Lord, we pray blessing on them and the others who could not be here today, but are still your faithful servants. We pray that this year ahead is going to be a year when your kingdom work goes forward regardless of any other restrictions, and that we will be found faithfully serving you when you return to your church world, in a forceful and powerful way, sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. So we ask this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Be seated.
Glenn and Walter has also been dealing with
Right.
Health issues, 91 years old. And
Yeah.
we appreciate the first we've been in contact with him.
Right. Remember Glenn and also in prayer?
Okay, we thank you for your long suffering. It's not even 12:30 yet, so we're on schedule because you cooperated, and we're really grateful for that. As if there's any other business that you wanted to see achieved here today, speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'd like to make a comment if I could. I appreciate it today and being able to be here to see this. I know you guys are trying to punch out the details, but I just want to commend the region and the conference, the whole vision. It did my heart good when we brought out the intent on the campground last year. And it does my heart good to see this, and I want you to know why. When I was a 20-something evangelist, 20-something, mid-20s, late 20s, I've been on most of the campgrounds in the denomination. And there were about 3 or 4 years in a row where I left GA and I drove to Camp Dixon. And I went down that mountain, headed to the flatlands, and each time down I would just be thinking for a while. Every time I showed up on Dixie, there was something new.
Mm-hmm.
New dorm, swimming pool, slide, you name it. And I would leave and I would go, why is GA doing this? What we call it.
Yeah.
And I would just have these thoughts, about an hour or two on the road. What's going on? So it does my heart good.
Yeah.
30 years ago, I was wondering,
Yeah.
So this is great stuff. Does my heart
Well, I appreciate your testimony, and I'm sorry for your grief. You've been a pastor long enough, so I know that you've been dealing with grief, and that's life. But it is good. It's always good when God's people work together. And sometimes we have to, give up a little in order to gain a lot. But let's thank the Lord for that privilege. And today has been an important day, I think, for the region and for the conference. So we're glad you were here for it. We really didn't want to do it merely virtually because it's too important what we're doing today. And so you made it possible, and we're grateful for that. We'd be open to a motion to adjourn then. Why don't you say Mary did, because she hasn't been on the record as our official motion maker. And second, you've got a choice of a multitude. Some of them are already on their way out the door. One's second. But anyway, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please rise. Jim Lee, how about a benediction from back there? You'll still be closest to the donuts, and I only have to take the ones that you don't eat, so please get some on the way out.
Let's pray. Lord, you are so wonderful, and you are awesome, and there's no English word or word of any other language that will describe you. And we want to thank you, Lord, and praise you for our conference, for the faithfulness of churches and pastors and lay leaders, Lord. We're so thankful, Lord God, that we've had a wonderful past year despite the pandemic, that you have blessed us financially. And we look forward, Lord, to our camping ministry expanding. And we're just so grateful, Lord, for all the blessings you have poured out on us. I thank you for the leadership of our conference, our region. And I just pray, Father, now that you will dismiss us with your blessings. May we be faithful to carry on the work of your kingdom in our respective churches. And may we not lose sight of what God shared with us this morning. That we want to expand your kingdom, Lord. We have the opportunity now to proclaim your gospel to the lost around us, and we be faithful in doing that. And we pray, Lord, that we'll find great joy in seeing people come to Christ. We ask now, Lord, that you'll guide us and direct us, give us safety as we travel for all. In Jesus' name, amen.
We're dismissed.